Hast du die Zeitung noch nicht gelesen?
Seite für Seite.
Die wollen ihn in Jerusalem vor Gericht stellen.
Isn't it incredible that the Hannah Arendt is offering to report for us?
Musst du dir das wirklich antun?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our very crowded Deutsches Haus at NYU, to an evening on Hannah Arendt. My name is Martin Rauchbar, I'm the director of Deutsches Haus, and I welcome you all here to this evening. As we've just seen in this trailer, there's a fantastic new film from Germany starting tomorrow at the Film Forum, focusing on one of the most important thinkers of the 20th century. When she reported in the early 60s for The New Yorker from the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem, and in the article wrote about her observation of the banality of evil, it led to a huge controversy, a controversy that is still ongoing many years later, and which is one of the main stories told in the film. But first and foremost, Hannah Arendt was a fascinating woman, and we're looking forward to discussing Hannah Arendt, the woman behind the film, here tonight. Before we do this, I want to welcome the several fascinating women who made this film happen. We're very honored to have here tonight one of the greatest film directors of German cinema, Margarethe von Trotta. And some of the greatest actresses, and the wonderful actresses Barbara Sukowa and McTeer with us tonight as well. We'd also would like to give a warm welcome to Pam Katz, a professor at NYU's film department and one of the screenwriters of the film. And we'd also like to give a warm welcome to Jerome Kohn, the director of the Hannah Arendt Center at the New School and an advisor on the film. I would also like to thank our partners of tonight's events, Zeitgeist Films, the distributor of the film, as well as Penguin Classics. You will be able to purchase 2 of Penguin's published works of Hannah Arendt here at our reception desk tonight, Between Past and Future and Eichmann in Jerusalem. I would also like to welcome Professor Ulrich Baer, NYU's Vice Provost for Arts, Humanities and Multicultural Affairs, and a Professor of German and Comparative Literature here at NYU. Wonderful friend of Deutsches Haus. He's a writer and translator of Rilke and also a specialist of Hannah Arendt, and he kindly agreed to moderate tonight's discussion. Deutsches Haus wishes you an enjoyable evening. Thank you very much for coming.
So, thank you very much, and I hope people in the back can see. It's a tremendous honor and pleasure for me to be in this bizarre position to direct a panel of these amazing people with Margarethe von Trotta's films. I'd like to point out that actually it is a very special day for us to have someone here and that you're bringing women who have given us characters on screen that are transformative for all of us, including boys like me. So I want to thank you for that. I'm getting older. I still think of myself as not quite mature yet. That's the point. So Margarethe von Trotta has really kind of changed the way in which we think about film, in which we think about German film, and has added something to the canon of great movies that make us think about the way the world is constructed and the way in which it could be constructed. All of you know her films, and I think it's important to also note that some of them have really taken on subjects that hadn't hitherto been really addressed. Strong women characters. Hannah Arendt once said, revolutionaries stay revolutionaries until the day the revolution has happened, and then they become conservative the next day. That is not something that could be said about Margarethe von Trotta. She's kind of pushed herself. That's, yeah. So, Barbara Sukowa, thank you for coming. Really incredible. Has been with us as an image on a screen in our life in person for in a way that is really timeless. I want to acknowledge McTeer, who's come down from up north to visit us today, the Mary McCarthy she's giving us tomorrow. Is an Academy Award nominee twice over, has been in a tremendous amount of films and theater performances, received Tony Award, Drama Desk Award, Laurence Olivier Theater Award, London Critics Circle Theater Award. So, thank you. Pam Katz, who teaches in the Tisch School of the Arts, is a writer, a dramatist, and somebody who's worked with Margarethe von Trotta on other films, among them Rosenstraße and The Other Woman. Thank you for joining us today as well. So Jerome Kohn is here also, who is the director of the Hannah Arendt Institute at the New School for Social Research. Available Arendt's papers to researchers and scholars and students all over the world when this wasn't state-of-the-art yet. So you've done a tremendous amount of service, I think, to somebody whose thinking continues to generate controversy. I will recede at this point and step back. I'll just manage the crowd if you need management. And we want to hear from these people about what gave them the first idea for this film, what they tried to do.
Thank you for your speech. And thank you for coming with this rain. I thought there might be first less people in the room than we are on the stage. So it's very touching for me that you came here. Yes, the first idea was not my first meeting with her or my first going in touch with her was The Specialist, the documentary of an Israeli documentarist about only the child. And I was very impressed by this film. And I read for Rosenstraße, which we wrote together. I read so many literature about Jewish history, Israeli history, Nazi time, and everything. I think I read for 2 years. And one of the books was Eichmann in Jerusalem. And I was very impressed by the book, but I didn't have the idea then to make a film out of it. Was just, and even I was not so impressed perhaps how she was describing Eichmann, because that was already in a way a certain knowledge in Germany then, no, because we knew that all these criminals were not always monsters and not looking like monsters, but they were in a way, they were really criminals. But that, for me, the very interesting in the book was how she described the several countries in Europe, how they treated their Jews, and who was willing to rebel against this order of the Nazis and holding back their Jews, like in Denmark or in Bulgaria, no? And so you could, and because I made Rosenstraße in this time, and there were also women in the streets who resisted and protested against the rules of the Nazis. So for me it was very interesting, all this, no? And the film, to make the film, you know, it's not always so easy to explain how ideas are coming up to you, or how you react when somebody proposes you to make. That was with Rosa Luxemburg, with Rosenstraße, and also with Hannah Arendt now. I have the feeling they are coming up to me. I'm not going to get them. They're coming up to me, and I have to be ready, or to be, to say no or to say yes in the end. But it's never that I'm going to say, I have to do a film now. I have to accept it. And that is the line in my life, perhaps, that I'm receiving and I'm choosing. Is it something for me that I have to do? And am I able to do it? And in this time for Hannah Arendt, I didn't know that I was able. I did fear very much, and I was hesitating very much, because it was a friend of ours, all of us, who came up after Rosenstraße and said to me, you have to do a film about Hannah Arendt. You are ready now, you did Rosa Luxemburg. And I said, no, please, go away. It was like Satan, no? He was tempting me, and I said no. But then, when an idea is put in your head, in your mind, it starts to grow, and it's like a flower. You have a little thing, and then I asked her, Pam, who was working with me on Rosenstraße, and I said to her, what do you think if we could write a script together? And she was so enthusiastic immediately. So I was pushed from both sides, from my friend's side and from her, and she went immediately, and she looked out for Jerome Kohn there and for the archives and in the new school, and so she was wonderful, and I couldn't go back again. So I was really forced, not any more tempted, but forced. So perhaps you can go on and describe.
How naive I was, yes. Because I said immediately it's a great idea, and you said, but she's a thinker. What will we show? And I said, and my first response to that was that, and I think I remember that she made a lot of people angry. I think she made a lot of people in my family angry, so there must be something to make a movie about. But I was very naive. You were very correct that it took us quite a while to find out how to make this film. And it now seems so obvious. Of course, we would do her confrontation with Eichmann. But in the beginning, you kind of have, when you don't know enough, you feel like you have to know everything before you can make those choices. So we read this wonderful biography by Elizabeth Young-Bruhl, who we also then met with Jerome. And we sort of got this frame of her enormously interesting life, and then we began to read the correspondence. In the moment that we read the correspondence with Mary McCarthy, it was clear that she had to be an important character. But we did try to do her whole life. We tried from a variety of perspectives to show everything, and we felt that it was impossible to do justice to any one section. And we just recently spoke about this, that I think when I'm searching for the key to a character's life, I'm looking a little bit from far away. I'm trying to find the frame for it. And Margarethe is always, as the director, trying to get close. And in a way, as you were trying to get closer, I was getting further away. And then we landed on Eichmann. And from that moment on, it seemed like the obvious choice, because it was, as we've all discussed, it was her third exile. She'd been kicked out of Germany. She was imprisoned in France. And when she came to America, she was very, very happy. And that was a moment in which her home and her life was once again threatened. And to be able to live that with her, close to her, that was also the opportunity, not just the subject matter she was dealing with, but finding out about this woman who'd led a very difficult life and who'd faced exile. And here we are.
Maybe if I can pick up on one point you made, that Arendt was somebody who, as you said, made a lot of people very angry after Eichmann. And even before that was someone very provocative in her thinking. And I was interested if, Barbara, you could talk a little bit about how to get to a character who produces such strong emotions in other people. And whether you felt that this character was somebody who people responded to her very strongly. And it was on one level to her thinking, which is to her, let's say, the part of reason and analytical thinking, but it was also on another level. People responded very strongly to her as an individual, as a person.
Yeah, I think she was not aware when she wrote Eichmann in Jerusalem that she would make people so angry. I think she was kind of shocked. She wanted to provoke, yes, and she wanted, above all, I think, she wanted to start a discussion and a discourse, and that people look at facts in a different way, but she was not aware that she would cause that kind of hurt, because people were angry because they were hurt. It was very close to many people having their entire family murdered, and in that context, you don't really like to hear the word banal. So a lot of people didn't even read the book, and I think, I'm sure she knew that she was good at provoking, and she was always such a sharp thinker, and she had a certain arrogance also, I think, and had no patience for fools. That she knew, that kind of reaction she got from people. And I don't think she cared about that, but what happened after Eichmann in Jerusalem, I think that was a shock to her. And I think Jerome probably, who knew Hannah personally, can probably say about these things much more than I.
No, I guess I'm the only one, not the only one in the room who knew Hannah, but perhaps the only one up here. Barbara, I wanted to pick up on something you said, this business about shocking. It's amazing that the logic involved. I read recently an article, and it could have been written 50 years ago, but it was written only a few days ago, and in it, it said that because Hannah told truths about certain Jewish leaders and their activities during the war, that therefore she was a self-hating Jew. Now, do you get that? The logic is unbelievable. Because she told a factual truth about people, and saying that for her it was the hardest part of the whole story, that she is called a self-hating Jew. I just wanted to add that. I
think it goes, the general claim is that she should never have aired the dirty laundry, which is in this argument that this was a terrible, terrible, horrible thing, and she should have never gone into this place and especially explained to the world things she found. That if these things were facts, then she should have kept that to herself. So I think the arrogance was that she felt, I have to put this out into the public. And I think this role of the public intellectual, she felt an obligation.
But it had been out in the public. Raoul Hilberg had written a book. Yes. So the facts were there. It had been talked about, but...
and she was rather fond of telling the truth.
Yeah, and she was a philosopher. She couldn't, as a philosopher, if you find out something what you think is truth, you have to tell it. It's not it's not a writer or it's somebody who's going with ideas and with facts also, but she couldn't step back. No. Even if she knew perhaps that it would be something what people are reacting a little bit in this way, they did. But it's stronger when you're a philosopher. You are one, so it's stronger than yourself that you have to put it out when you know.
Maybe if I can bring Janet in to sort of say, you're kind of the foil in the movie to her in a certain way, her close friend who knows her in a way that other people may not have known her. And can you sort of talk about a bit getting also from Pam's and Margarethe's sort of script into this character of somebody who was such an important figure for her?
Actually, when I was listening to you talking about that point, I was reminded of a friend of mine a long time ago when I was asked to play a psychiatrist in a mental institute. And I went to have a long discussion with this psychiatrist, and I remember her telling me all these stories, and I was very young. I remember her saying to her, "Gosh, have you ever been in the room with really scary people?" And she said, "Oh, absolutely. I've been threatened to kill me several times." I said, "Weren't you scared?" She said, "Good Lord, no, it was far too fascinating." And I remember thinking, that's something so specific about the way somebody thinks, that they think. Their thinking and their feeling are two completely separate things. And I think for somebody who is the ultimate thinker, the philosopher, somebody who likes to look at something and dissect it and say, look at that interesting point and that and that and that, she can dissect things in an intellectual way, in the way that somebody who feels, whose feelings get involved in their emotion, in their thoughts, can get blurred. And I think, Hannah was very like that. I mean, I didn't meet Hannah either, but, from the way she wrote and what she wrote about, and clearly in her letters to Mary and their friendship, she was kind of surprised that people were so angry and so upset, because surely it was just terribly interesting what she was talking about, that actually to try and dissect how so many people could become could do such, ordinary people next door could do such dreadful things to other human beings. And that was many people. And her struggle to understand that, which of course nobody's ever come to, led to the fascination for Eichmann and, of course, the banality of evil. Which leads me to your point, which is that I think, you know, Mary McCarthy was also a great thinker, but when you're playing a character, you always have to say, why am I in this film? Why is this character in this film, and what am I here to do? And I think one of the things is that point exactly, that Mary was somebody who, when you see the film, you know, from the word go, she's much more, not passionate's the wrong word, but she's more of a feeling person, even though she's very clever. And that what she does is she's sort of the foil for Hannah to be, so that Mary is the one who's going, what did you expect? You know, how could you not feel that this would happen? Because she's such a great thinker. And then, of course, because they had such a great friendship, to show the loyalty of these two female friends who were loyal throughout their lives. From the moment they knew each other, they adored each other and were great, great friends. And that friendship was so important. Yeah, that's it.
From a film perspective, one of the moments, she's fascinated, she needs to tell the truth, and then she realizes this thing in that box is not fascinating. It's not interesting. It's not incredible. It's not a spectacle. She actually thinks it's being made into something, and so I was wondering how Pam or Margarethe and Barbara, how you conveyed this moment where she's sitting watching the trial from behind, or being in the courtroom, and realizing it's not as awful and horrific to see this little man right there. And how you conveyed that, because that's one of it's something, she has a kind of crisis of conscience. She comes and wants to see this monster, and then she says, there is no monster here.
But first let me explain why I chose the real material. And when you will see the film, there's real material of Eichmann during the trial. And I had so many questions now always when I'm doing interviews. Why you didn't choose the actor? Why you show the real Eichmann? And I knew it from the beginning. Just when I saw the specialist, and there I could really feel what character he was, or what bureaucrat or what mediocre man he was. And choosing an actor that would have been much more, from the part of the public, much more admiration for the man, for the actor who is acting it out so wonderfully and so brilliant, and the performance would be great. And so there's a sort of admiration for a character which I wanted that the people could see the mediocrity. So we chose to put, Pam and me, to put the real material in, but then you had to choose also the place, how to deal with it, because when she's in the courtroom and she's sitting there in color, shot in color, and then she sees Eichmann and he's in black and white. That could not be. That is a false language, cinematographic language. So we had the chance to, when we made the location, looking for the location in Israel, we found photographs that there's on one floor, it's a courtroom, and the floor under the courtroom was a press room. And we found photos, and so I thought, oh my God! And in this courtroom, there's on all the walls is a television where you can look, because the American television filmed the whole process, the whole trial, all the time. So they could look in the press room on all the four walls. They can follow the trial, and that was in black and white. So, and sometimes it was even better, because they were, giving only the close-up, and not in the courtroom. When you are sitting in the courtroom, you see the person always from the wide angle, in a way, no? And there you could really see in his face, and all this mimic, and all the gestures, and you really could feel how thoughtless he was, and how mediocre he was. And so we introduced that in the film. And And my explanation, because you have always to give yourself an explanation why you do things, I said she was so much smoking, but because you will see, she's a chain smoker in the film, and she was it in life, and even more than we could show. Yeah. No, because I saw the film for the first time in Israel, and there came up a nephew, but I didn't know that she had still a nephew. I knew two nieces, but not the nephew. So he came up and said, I'm the nephew. And I said, oh my God, now he will tell me what I did all wrong, and that I didn't know her really, and that she was such a different person. And after the film, he was sitting there like you now, and I said, and now what are you telling her? And he said the first thing, she was smoking much more than in your film. And therefore, she was always sitting in the press room because she could smoke. So I was really relieved, because for me it was an invention. I thought it's an invention, and it was true. So, yeah.
I would just like to add that showing the real Eichmann in the Man in the Glass Booth and all of that, it's seamless. I don't know how you did it. I am absolutely amazed, because usually when an actuality is put into a film, it stands out. But it's really marvelous, I think. And one other thing, I wanted to say, Barbara, how did you do all that smoking? Because I know you don't smoke. These are amazing.
Well, I used to be a smoker. So I took herbal cigarettes. But it was interesting how quickly the desire to smoke came. But I made myself a promise, whenever the cut was after the scene, I did not take another. And I really didn't do it. So I did not start smoking again after the film. I want to say something what you said about the psychiatrist. And the word truth came up a lot with. My feeling is with what I read from Hannah Arendt is that I feel that through all the writings, somehow it always comes back to the fear that there might be something like a totalitarian state, a totalitarian society. And she once wrote, in a totalitarian state, it's like being in a mental institution where everybody has the same psychosis. And you just don't know anymore what is the truth and what is real. And I think she was really worried about that. And her feeling that in a mass society that more and more happens and more the danger is of a totalitarian state where you don't know anymore what the truth is. And I think we have that today. I mean, Benghazi, what is the truth, or whatever comes up. I think, everybody kind of, this country is divided into Fox 5 and MSNBC, and you watch something and you have already in your head kind of what you want to hear. And I think it was brilliant and from her that she was exactly not doing that. You couldn't put her in a place. You couldn't, when she was asked, are you a liberal, are you a conservative, she said, I don't know. And I think it's because she wanted to really find out the truth. And it didn't matter what party or what group had it at what moment.
Now you can consider how she works, no? And how she's a thinking person, no? Because all the time I went, why Barbara Sukowa, and how did she get the part, and so on. I think because it's the most intelligent person, the most intelligent actress I know. So now she really gave you the proof. Huh?
Margarethe, I wanted to ask you one thing. You have written, if I'm not mistaken, that for you, Arendt's enduring legacy is this thinking without banisters, this Denken ohne Geländer. And that, you know, I happen to have been there when she said that. And what she said, it was at a conference, actually, and she was answering to some rather personal questions. And she said, I'm going to tell you something now, and I've never written it. Now it's in print a lot, but it never had been before. And she just said this word, thinking without banisters, she said, I've always kept that image for myself. Now, it's such a striking image. I mean, if you can imagine going a stairway with no banister on either side, maybe it's the abyss of the past on one side and maybe of the future on the other side, but that's not the point. The point is how hard it would be to go up and down that banisterless stairway as an image of her thinking. I, too, am extremely impressed with that image, and I just wondered if that was part of what you wanted to show in the film.
Absolutely, because she really, and what she's saying in the end, you have to think with your own mind, no, to preserve you from catastrophes. But on the other hand, you didn't see the film now, but I will tell you so to look at it a little bit more precisely, because I'm always asked why I introduced also Heidegger, because you know that Heidegger was her lover, and so the Jewish girl was a Nazi, and so that would have been. If we would have chosen to make a film about this love affair, we could have got the money much easier. Marty and Hannah, that would have been a good title. And but we from the beginning, we said no. He was her lover, and he was the master of thinking. No, she learned thinking with him or in his seminar. But he was not the main man in her life. That was Heinrich Blücher, her really. No, you think so too. Well, I think, but I didn't meet them, so, but you know it. But Heidegger is a person in the film, because we chose also the Eichmann trial and these 4 years of Eichmann, because it's not only thinking. When I said in the beginning, she is a thinker, how you can portray a thought, it's invisible, how you can do that. And here with Eichmann, you have an adversary. You have somebody to look at. And you can feel how she's looking at him, observing him, and how her thoughts are developing in front of him. So for me, it's like a duel. It's on one part, it's Eichmann, on the other part, who is not a thinker, who is thoughtless, like she says, not stupid, but thoughtless. And on the other hand, it's her, the thinking woman. And she says in the end, her wonderful speech in the end, where she says thinking can prevent catastrophes, can prevent us from catastrophes. But then there's a master of thinking, and he's there. And he was a Nazi, and he stepped in this was heißt Falle? Trap of being a Nazi. So it's not so easy that thinking can help you and prevent you from doing the wrong steps. So he's there only for that, for me, in the film. So when you are looking at the film, think about that it's not because he was her lover.
Pam, could you talk a little bit about whether you used her writings or Mary McCarthy's writings or something from the letters to generate some of the dialogue or the scenes that were imagined that aren't taken from recorded footage?
Yes, the relationship between Mary McCarthy and Barbara. Yes, definitely we use some of the things that they actually said. But it's not like you pull out a line and make that a line of dialogue. It's more that you kind of imbibe the warmth of their relationship and what the kinds of things that they spoke about. And one thing I think that we both enjoyed is that they're two brilliant women who talked about brilliant things, but they also had a lot of fun together, and they gossiped and talked about men. And it was a wonderful opportunity to show a deep female relationship, but it's it's so often that either they're talking about men or they're talking about ideas. And this time you had really both. And I thought that was wonderful. The other thing that Mary McCarthy as a figure, I think, contributed to the film is she also wrote about Hannah. She defended Hannah and wrote about her, and she had this wonderful phrase that she said when she saw Hannah teaching, it was like the motions of the mind made visible in action and gesture. And I think when Margarethe was talking about how to show a movie about a thinker, when we decided to do Eichmann, we had that opportunity to make the motions of her mind visible. So it was Mary McCarthy's vision of her, along with their friendship that one could learn about throughout the correspondence, that had a huge impact on the film, especially because we had such a wonderful Mary McCarthy.
And tell us how you prepared, no? Because I was amazed when you, no, because to Mary McCarthy, she spoke really with her accent and with her, Bostonian. I didn't understand it because I can't make the difference between a New Yorker or Boston, but she did, and so.
There's quite a bit on YouTube. Where she talks, and she had that very particular Vassar accent, which which is old-fashioned and doesn't sort of exist anymore, but it's sort of a cross between Boston and Vassar and English. And
well, my husband called up from Paris the other day, where we live, and he asked me about the various things that were happening to me that were making me feel so strange, stranger and stranger. And I told him about the Vassar Club, talking to the Vassar Club in Washington and other events. And I finally said, and now Dr. Bonwit is making me some television teeth. And he said, come home.
And so I tried to tone it down a little, because I felt, when I listened to her, I felt that if I did it exactly the way she did it, which was very, she was very kind of flash and harsh, and she had that, And I felt it would just sound like I was trying to do a caricature. So I tried to just sort of do a little, a hint of it, so that you had the certain of the vowel sounds and things like that. And just to try and give the impression. And I think if you play a real person, I think what's also wonderful about the choices that Barbara and Margarethe made was, it would have been easier to have had a face full of prosthetics and, to make her try and look exactly the same as all the pictures. And you kind of go, but why? What's the point? You're trying to create somebody who didn't care about any of that anyway. She just was thinking. So let's see her thinking. Let's not see the, and I sort of felt it was sort of the same with my way of doing Mary, which was to kind of somewhere, if that's the character and this is you sort of meet them there. And I felt that the things that I had in common with Mary is that I'm frightfully intelligent, and I have great hair, and that I'm deeply, deeply loyal. That is true, and so that the kind of loyalty that Mary had and the absolute, that. Well, you haven't seen the film, so there's a little scene where she's, you see her girding her loins going, right, I'll fight for my friend. And I would do that in no uncertain terms. And I think that quality and that adoration that she had and that kind of respect, and to be able to, was, and of course very easy to do because Barbara's magnificent. And gorgeous, and was Hannah Eichmann. I mean, Hannah Eichmann. Hannah Arendt. And I think to be able to see, it's a very difficult thing to portray somebody thinking. I mean, not only in the writing, but in the doing, because you have to be brave enough as an actor to sit there and just think it and believe that the camera will pick it up and that it's interesting. And what's so amazing about these two is, having worked together so many times, they have such trust and faith in each other that each other allows the other to be the best that they can be in a way that's really wonderful. So that, and they're very funny to listen to on set, I can't tell you. They come out and they disagree, and it's all very marvelous. And they get all heated, and it's just brilliant. And then out of it comes this much better idea than one of them would have come up with in the first place. And it's such a great, great collaboration. And to see that, to witness that from the side, it was, as a newcomer into this little triumvirate, was wonderful, really, really interesting, and possibly my favorite bit about the whole thing, actually, was to see. It was wonderful, wonderful.
I want to second that.
Wait, I just want to clear, that was a quote, that was not her slip, that's a slip that was in the film. I just want to clear your...
You wrote it, actually, right?
Actually, it was somebody, it's a true slip. It was, I was only reporting the facts. But I just to continue that line, I mean, part of my enthusiasm was incredibly naive, of course, but when Margarethe von Trotta says that she would like to direct a film about Hannah Arendt, and Barbara Sukowa is going to play the role, I mean, I think I had good reasons to be incredibly enthusiastic.
But we were so scared.
Yeah. So we both were always scared until the end of the film. We had the feeling we are going hand by hand through a tunnel, and we didn't know if the light will be at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, that was really our feeling. And every morning we looked at each other and said, are we right, are we wrong? But we started, so we had to go through. Yeah. We couldn't go backwards. Yeah, you didn't see the film then. Afterwards, you will understand.
There was also, two German women doing, this film about Hannah Arendt and this Jewish topic and the Holocaust and all. And, we thought people might say, how dare you? Luckily, we found a Jew then to... So, no.
I found her first.
Yes.
I found her since a long time.
But we have been...
No, but it is interesting, because I think that was, it's a true dynamic. I never knew how frightened you were during the filming. I didn't, I was left out of that in a way. But there is a fear that you two had that I don't have, and I think it is for that reason. And I think it's very apropos to the subject. I mean, I never had the sense I don't have the right to write about this. I thought I had every right and more. I mean, so, and that was an interesting thing that came up even as we were writing and revising the script, I think, that difference in our position towards the subject.
Yeah, and I remember when I was afraid to put in this, what she was saying in 5 pages only, but about the cooperation of some of the Jewish leaders. I told her, but me as a German, I'm afraid to put that in. Have we the right, or can we do that? And she said, yes, it has to be there, because she wrote it, and that was also because the first title of the film was a controversy, and not Hannah Arendt. So that was one point for the controversy. So we couldn't let that out. No, and when she said it to me, I said, okay, so I'm following you.
Barbara, if you could say one more thing what you said earlier, that actually you felt this film can teach us something about to have that kind of courage today to think without having to fall into either camp or ideology or something like that. Because the film is so intense, and your intensity in it, when I heard you just speak right now, it's as if you tapped into something that you feel there's still something to be said today out of this controversy, not to settle it, but actually the opposite, to open up why it generated this kind of animosity.
Well, Hannah Arendt thought that thinking comes alive if people speak to each other. I'm always afraid to say something because he's a specialist. I'm sure there are many specialists in there, but that's how I understood it. That she really, I think she even said like, it humanizes thinking. And I think so often when I watch TV, for example, and I see groups of people talk, they don't listen to each other. Everybody just tries to bring out their argument, what they have, and find in their head arguments for their point of view. And that is just so uncreative. I mean, when you speak what you know anyway, that's kind of boring, actually. So it is so much more interesting to to listen and find out people from maybe the opposite of what you think. And I think that is a real important thing. And I think she had a bit of an idealistic idea about politics, to be removed from social affairs, from economical affairs, but she loved this idea of people, like in the ancient Greek polis, to free people to talk to each other, to exchange opinions. And I think there is so little, even physical room for this. So in America, I think the churches here probably take a lot of that, space. But I think that is very important, that there is an actual physical space where people, and not just leave it to people in the government, but she was very infatuated with the, how do you say that in English, Räterepublik? No, what was the Räterepublik in the Weimar Republic, the council, where actually the councils, yeah. And I think that is something to think about, and I find that interesting for our time also, and I think that is very modern to think that way. I think that is necessary, that autonomic groups, are in discourse with each other, and not just delegated to some person they elect. Does that answer your question? No. Okay.
Excuse me, this is a very general remark, but I think to me, it's an extraordinary phenomenon that this book, and now this movie, the trial of Eichmann was really one of the successor trials to the very, very, it started in 1945, the Nuremberg trials, where really the big Nazis were called to account. Eichmann was not wanted in that group. There was Goering, there was Ribbentrop, there was Jodl, there was Kaltenborn, there were so many. And yet, today, why is it that people are so fascinated by this Eichmann trial, and I'm sure are going to be more and more so? Isn't it that what Hannah Arendt paints in this book, and she did it many other places as well, is a general moral breakdown among so-called civilized societies? And that, I think, is what is truly controversial about this work, and it is why it garners more readers every year, and now it's going to have a lot of viewers.
It was also the first really media sort of televised trial. So what Margarethe said, it was very important. It was on television all the time. And part of it was to create a kind of transparency, to actually make it available to the public to see for themselves. And this is what I think what you're saying, Barbara. Hannah Arendt had this kind of faith in some institutions that they would be able to do that. So she took the Israeli court to task for thinking, are you really living up to the highest standard of what a court could do? To create transparency in the trial, which the intention was to put it on television and on the radio so people could follow it for themselves. And I think it also gave her the sense that she could then go in and form her own opinion. That's the flip side of that. You trust the institutions to create a kind of transparency in this dialogue, but that entitled you to have your own opinion, as you say.
I think, it's important to say that she wanted it to be a crime against humanity. That was that it should have been before an international tribunal. That was a big source of controversy. But I think that brings us right back to what Margarethe was saying about using the real footage and not looking at the performance of an actor playing Eichmann, and it would leave his interpretation in the middle. The film now hopefully gives people yet another chance to kind of have a look at the real man and make some judgments of their own, for the same reasons that the trial itself was filmed, because so much has been made of what did Hannah Arendt see, what did she write about him, what was her interpretation, where did she hit the truth and where didn't she? And by seeing the real man in the film, we get a chance as an audience then also to have a look at him and think about that as well for ourselves.
Yeah, but unfortunately, perhaps only for the German-speaking spectators, he offers his real incapacity to think. Because for English audience, you have only the subtitled, and the incapacity to really say one sentence in a grammatically just way. I can't do it in English, but in German I can do it. So he was German and he couldn't do it. And he was only speaking in cliches and in bureaucratic formulations. And there's not one sentence you can feel that it comes out of a person, of a persona. That is a philosophical expression, but and therefore really she, as a German, she could follow what he was saying and could follow that he was not thinking at all. And I want only to give your attention when you then see the film, for me, the proof that because there are so many people now saying, oh, he was lying and he was much more intelligent, that he wanted to show us and so on. But this theory that he was thoughtless, when he's asked from the German judge, German-speaking judge in Israel, do you think if there would have been more civic courage, that would be different? And he responds, oh yes, when there would have been, the civic courage would have been organized in a hierarchical way, then I would have, no? So to make this combination of civic courage with hierarchical thinking. So that for me is a proof that really he didn't understand nothing, no?
And when Margarethe heard that line, we were together and she jumped off the couch and said, oh my God, that is it. That explains everything. But it's interesting you say, I can speak German, although I would never be able to understand everything he said. I feel his physical presentation is also something that gives you a very strong sense of him as a man. And probably the subtitles in English, they're more grammatical than they should be, but that is actually translated just like that. So I'll be curious to see how the American audience feels about having an ability to judge whether he was acting or not, or actually think about it on a deeper level than that question is usually asked.
There has been a lot more research now since Hannah Arendt wrote this book. So even if you feel that he is acting and that if you have your own opinion, it's different from Hannah Arendt's opinion. I think the important thing in the movie is that the phenomenon still exists. Whether it was true in the case of Eichmann, that is for everyone to decide, but the phenomenon exists and has existed in other people and exists still, and that is the interesting point, I think, not whether this particular man, she nailed it with him.
Perhaps Jerome could tell us a little bit more about these new discoveries, which I don't believe so much, but people are.
I agree with you, Margarethe. I don't believe them at all. The new discoveries, what you said is to hear what Eichmann says. Then it seems right what Arendt said. This is a thoughtless man. He had, one could say, he had a cliche for every emergency, and this elated him. That's the thing that she stresses in the book over and over again. His elation when he had all this storage basket of cliches that had nothing to do with what was being talked about, but it elated him. And this, I think, people have found. He died he was executed, he was hanged, but he died with a certain amount of dignity, even though he was, in another sense, a clown. It was as if he didn't realize it was his own death. As she said, he just before he was hanged, he made a speech from the gallows, and he said, for the German, way of saying that I absolutely don't believe in any kind of afterlife, and gentlemen, we will all meet again very soon. It's that sort of thing, and this new kind of revised history. I mean, when they say that, someone wrote me again just the other day, that, oh, well, Eichmann, you know, after a certain time was a very, very important man in the whole thing. Well, was he? I mean, the Germans in the Nuremberg trials certainly didn't think he was. His defense counsel certainly didn't think he was. And perhaps the most telling thing is that he never got promoted. All he wanted to do was to be promoted from a lieutenant colonel to a full colonel, and he never was.
No, therefore, in the interviews he did with this Dutch Nazi now, and everybody now, because they came out now, these interviews, she knew not all of them, but she knew a part of them, and there he makes himself so important, and he said, oh, and I wanted that many more Jews will still die, and so he made himself a figure of importance, what he didn't, but he wasn't. But for me, I always search of psychological reasons also why people are behaving like that. And he was hiding already since a long time. He was a nobody there. He was a nobody in a philosophical way. But there he was really, nobody knew that he was a big thing under the Nazis. So when this guy came up and gave him the opportunity to be again somebody who is important, and what Jerome was telling, that in totalitarian systems it's the whole collapse, moral collapse in a society. That is the real point she puts out, and that it's not only the murderers or the people doing the crimes, but also the victims. They lose every idea of morality, and that's not their fault. That's the fault of the system. Therefore, you have to fight against totalitarianism.
One of her main accusations was that he could not think from someone else's standpoint. And she keeps on emphasizing that throughout her work. I mean, Eichmann's address was known in the 50s. No one tried to extradite him. Germany didn't go after him. He lived somewhere and this address was known. So to remember also that when he finally arrived on trial, there had been 10 years of nobody doing anything in this regard. And then what happens in the 60s in America with Stanley Milgram and the questions what happens in Vietnam later on, all these questions are generated by her. Will people do anything under duress or when they're ordered to do so? So I think the context becomes much larger in a sense. But I wanted to ask you whether you think your film would be properly called a German film, because I felt it was actually embodying several standpoints and perspectives, and that was the point of it, that it switches between languages, positions, countries. And that what comes out that Hannah Arendt isn't, you said it's her third exile in the mid-60s, but that she isn't so stably located anymore, although she kept on writing and she talked about what German meant to her as a language. But where you see this film fitting in, or maybe the point is that it doesn't quite fit into one tradition or one place?
I would say it's a German film. It comes out from a German tradition. But she was German, and she came out from a German cultural tradition, and she never blamed it, or she never denied it. She denied, she would never have wanted to go back to Germany, because that was impossible for her, but she never denied her language and her German culture. She came from the Greek philosophy, from Plato, and then to Kant, and she was raised up in the city of Kant in Königsberg. So she read Kant when she was 14. So she was very, very rooted in the German culture and German philosophy. So that's normal that she stood with it. And you can hear it with her accent too. She never learned English in the right way.
some of my favorite scenes in the movie were between Hannah and her husband. Just moving papers, being at home. They were just, how could you talk a little bit about those scenes, the private Hannah? Where did they come from?
You know, she wrote so many letters, and there's a big correspondence also with Heinrich Blücher, her husband, with Jaspers, Karl Jaspers, with Heidegger, with Mary McCarthy. There's a big volume of so really you could get out a lot of things out of these letters, and the feeling, you know, the tenderness and also the irony, and you know, when you are husband and wife, that you have some points together which only you know, no? And you can make a point on when she's always saying him, or monsieur, or what's the other name you give him? Stops, and you know, that is all so little things. We got them out all of her letters, and also because we knew her friend Lotte Köhler, who is has a part in the film too. She was when we met her, she was already more than 80 years old, but she was very awake, and she told us a lot about these two people too. And she told us a little bit gossip also. And so we knew of her that Heinrich was a womanizer, and he had here and there, and so we put that in the film. That gives life to the flesh, no? To scenes.
Just to add with your perception, I mean, the name of the correspondence between her and her husband is My Four Walls, which is how she thought of him. So,
did Hannah have a history with the New Yorker, and why was she chosen to write about the trial?
Well, as I understand it, she and Mr. Shawn had a great deal of respect for each other.
Absolutely true.
And she, I believe, wrote to him saying that she would like to cover this trial. And the reason she wanted to do it, she said very explicitly later that in the earlier book, The Origins of Totalitarianism, which is a big, thick, and heavy tome in every sense, she said that she had dealt with a type of Nazi criminal, but she wanted to see one in the flesh. And she and her husband, some of them didn't want her to go, some of her, that's in the film too, but she was determined to go, and I think that was the main reason why.
I just wanted to ask, what was the thinking behind the inclusion of the scene, which I read somewhere it was not literally true, of the 4 sort of Zionist thugs jumping out of a car and threatening her while she's walking in the country?
somebody incorrectly has posted an ill-informed article online saying that that scene has absolutely no basis in reality, which is not true. They were not 4 Zionist thugs. That was Siegfried Moses, he is named. He was indeed a friend of hers. And in fact, when the articles came out, she was in Switzerland with Karl Jaspers. Because we didn't have the space or ability to include the very important Jaspers in the story, we had her go up to her country house. So Siegfried Moses, who was originally the comptroller of Israel, actually came on behalf of the Council of German Jews. He flew to Switzerland in reality. In our movie, he flies to America and asks her to stop the publication of the book. The reason for the bodyguards was because we assumed that any official flying from Israel would indeed be there with bodyguards. We made up the dialogue, of course, but the actual event that Siegfried Moses came and asked her to stop the publication of the book is accurate.
And in reality, the book was published in Israel only in 2002. So it was written in 1963, and so it was real. This.
Many years ago in Vienna, I heard Martin Heidegger give a speech, of all places, in the Burgtheater, which has about 2,000 seats, I think. The hall was full. I listened to it. I didn't understand a word. And I thought, well, this is because of my limited German. But since 2000 Viennese also didn't seem to understand a word, I figure it must be Heidegger's German. What did she see in, or fail to see in, a man who spoke like a combination of Kant, Hegel, and Gertrude Stein?
But she was not the only one to be attracted by, not as a lover, but as a thinker. Huh?
But she was the most intelligent.
No, there was Günther Stern, who was also, and Hans Jonas. There were several students, and mainly Jewish students coming to him, because he was then the master of thinking, the new master of, and I think he was also, in this time, he was a modern thinker. And so many came up to him. I don't read him with pleasure. I detest him, but I'm not a philosopher. Great philosophers are saying that he was very important. I can't read his language. Then I agree with you. I'm getting,
Thank you. Okay. Oh.
But I think you answered that question earlier when you said she felt that he taught her to think. It was the most important thing in her life. And
he said he was such a terrible speaking man.
Well, I mean, there are many people who think Heidegger was one of the truly great philosophers of all time. So,
what has been the reaction to the film in Israel so far?
I was once in the Women's Film Festival. I've showed it. That was for the first time. And there it was received very, 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 very nicely and very friendly. Only two women who had already a certain age, and they came up to me and said, and the one said, I hate Hannah Arendt, and then I said, but when you have seen the film, perhaps you don't hate her anymore. And she said, I hate her even more now. So but that was one, and the other just tried and said, no, I can't. I have people who were dying, and so, but it was not an argument. But all the others were very pleased by the film, and I had, subsidies from the state of Israel. I had an Israeli co-producer. We had subsidies from Jerusalem, from the Jerusalem Film Fund. So that was already a sign that there were a lot of people who wanted this film, and he wanted and liked her and knew about her. And when I was now, for the real premiere, I was only in Jerusalem presenting the film in the Cinematheque of Jerusalem, and there was a professor of Yad Vashem who was sponsoring the whole evening, and he spoke about her in very, very positive terms, and he wouldn't have sponsored the evening and we got the material from there. And so, and in Hannah Arendt, they told me it was a very good critic. So it was not, I was a little bit afraid, sure. But maybe there were some persons, but I didn't hear about them.
What I know about Hannah Arendt up until now, I got from Maxine Green, who's a philosopher of education. She's 96 years old at Teachers College, and she loves to quote Arendt's metaphor for community as a web of human relationships. It's one of the beautiful, so it goes back to what you were saying about dialogue. I teach at a community college, I teach English, and so I'm really aware of this kind of dumbing down of the education system, when they're taking out humanities and they're taking out philosophy, and they're pushing a business major on people now, So I think this film, I'm just so happy that it's here, and I'm wondering how we can build a movement around this. I mean, to have a thinker featured in a major film, and the power of film also, and to sort of have a revival of Arendt. I think a lot of politicians need to read this. How can, will this go, will you be, is this going to be on major media? I mean, Charlie Rose should have you on, right?
Thank you. I think that was a wonderful last sentence.
I want to thank the panelists. It's really a pleasure, wonderful. Thank you for taking the time, for opening. Thank you again.
it is this phenomenon that I have called the banality of evil.